Rita?
Well, I would argue that the Tories have been treacherous to their voters because they talk conservative whenever it's election time, but then as soon as they're in power, they govern from the left as if they're Labor, and they're going to pay a very heavy price indeed. What is your prediction for who will be the opposition? Who's going to be, because we know Labor's going to win, they're going to win in a landslide, but who is going to prevail from the other contenders? The Liberal Democrats were in prime position there for a period.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what we've got here is the beginning of a prolonged civil war between the established British Tory right and a new generation of national conservatives represented by the likes of Farage, who are really saying, look, we have to completely renew, we have to reinvent conservatism, we've got to make it more in touch with the people. So here's my prediction. We're going to have a really big Labour majority government, probably the biggest Labour majority we've had in this country since 1997, since the time of Tony Blair. I think Labour will do very well. The Liberal Democrats will do reasonably well. They'll get 30, 40 seats. The Scottish Nationalists will do reasonably well. So the liberal left position, if you like, accepting immigration, accepting woke ideology, wanting to get us back into the European Union, they're all going to do very well. And then there's this big battle for the right. And look, as long as Nigel Farage is elected into Parliament, he will be one of the big opposition voices in British politics. He won't have the biggest party by any stretch, but simply through the force of his charisma, simply through the force of his media skills, through the fact that he is supported by millions of people across the country, that oppositional voice will be taken very seriously. And it will become stronger, Rita, if another thing happens that I'm predicting, which is that the Conservatives will respond to this election defeat by moving even further to the cultural left. They'll say, look, we need to basically become Labour. We need to be a big state, big tax, big immigration party. And of course, that will then leave more room for Nigel Farage as we go through this Parliament. So, look, he's going to be feeling very confident. I'm with him tomorrow in the seat of Clacton in Essex, watching his campaign there locally. I can tell you, he feels like he's on top of the world. He feels like it's 2016 all over again. He can't believe how badly the British Tories are losing touch with all those voters that they promised they'd give them lower immigration. They'd give them a self-governing independent nation. They'd control the borders. They'd push back against woke ideology. And Rita is absolutely right. There is a word here, and that word is betrayal. And many voters feel that very, very strongly.
James.
Yeah, well, Matthew, speaking of betrayal, one of the problems for the Tories is they've been beset by scandal, and now just days out from an election, they've got another one. The Times have revealed that a number of Rishi Sunak's inner sanctum have been caught placing dozens of bets on the timing of the election, including his personal protection officer, another key advisor. This just feeds into the narrative, doesn't it, that the Tories have had one rule for the country and a completely different rule for themselves?
Well, look, this is classic Tory behaviour. They're putting themselves and the party ahead of the country, and many voters can sense this. But there's also a deeper question here with regard to Rishi Sunak and his administration. Remember, Rishi Sunak has no mandate. OK, so viewers who are not familiar with British politics might not be aware of this, but he was never elected to become leader of the Conservative Party. He was appointed, right? So that's a really, really important point. And then there's the mission, the vision. What does Rishi Sunak stand for? He came in after Boris Johnson was turfed out. He did have a mandate, by the way. Liz Truss was turfed out. She had a mandate. Rishi Sunak was brought in by the Tory elite class who said we must get the adults back into the room, aka technocracy, managerialism, the same old bland consensus that we've had for years that voters rejected through that Brexit referendum. And here's my question. What was it all for? What was this for, this project, this installation of Rishi Sunak? What has he actually given the country? He's given us the highest tax burden since the 1950s and 60s. We've got the highest rates of legal migration that we've ever had. We've lost control of the borders. Illegal migration is completely out of control. The British Tories have mainstreamed woke ideology. They've got kids being taught that boys can become girls, that girls can become boys. We've got critical race theory in our primary and secondary schools. We're importing a lot of that nonsense from America. But look, conservatives are supposed to stand up against this stuff. And so every time Rishi Sunak has been in front of voters during this election, the voters have increasingly said, actually, I don't like that guy. That guy's not really for me. Why is this guy even prime minister? I don't get it. And let me tell you, there's one thing briefly that everybody will remember about this election campaign for years, decades to come. And it's this: when Rishi Sunak decided to leave the D-Day anniversary early, he went to France for a few hours, and then, against the advice of some of his advisors, he left the anniversary early. And that raised a much deeper question in this country, which is, does this guy even believe in Britain? Does he really believe in our history, identity, culture, and values? And that, too, has been an enormous open goal for Nigel Farage, who has understandably kicked a load of footballs into that open goal during this election campaign.
But one thing, Matt, as well, that Nigel Farage pointed out was it wasn't just Rishi Sunak. Last year, apparently, Keir Starmer had his poppy on during the morning when he was attending various events, and then when he attended an Islamic event, the poppy mysteriously disappeared. And Nigel Farage asked the BBC interviewer whether this was a sign that maybe Keir Starmer as well had didn't quite know the significance of D-Day. Just tell us briefly, Matt, so Farage has attacked net zero, which is fantastic. COVID vaccines, he wants to look into that. Lockdowns, masks, he wants to look into that. Migration is the big thing. He's prepared to tackle trans ideology. These are all the culture war issues that so many politicians on the right have avoided for years and years. He is a cultural warrior. What do you think will happen between now and the election? Will the Conservatives, idiots like David Cameron, who isn't even elected to Parliament and is criticising Farage, will they come around and start to see that they need to maybe split the seats somehow, do some kind of deal, or is that not on the table?
In brief, there will be no deal between the Conservatives and Nigel Farage. Why would he make a deal when he thinks, understandably, he can win the whole House? Yeah. And that's what he's thinking. Not necessarily, of course, at this election. Remember, we're in a first-past-the-post system. But here's what Farage is hoping. He wins a handful of seats in 10 days' time. Maybe he wins 5 million votes. Maybe he wins 100 second places. Maybe he is the alternative to Labour across all of those working-class districts. Then he comes out of the election, he says, right, now I'm going to take over what remains of the Conservative Party. And he invites all of those disillusioned Conservatives to join with him to build a new political movement in British politics. This is where it's all going. This is going to be an incredibly bumpy, volatile, chaotic period in British politics, which I hope will get us to a much more representative and successful Conservative movement that's more in touch with the people, because what we've got at the moment cannot continue. It is a joke of a Conservative Party that it is simply not conservative on any major issue at all. It's completely and consistently given way to liberal progressives on a whole host of issues. And so Farage, stronger than ever. That's the conclusion from this election.
Fantastic. Matt Goodwin, so great to have you on the show. I hope you will join us on that bumpy road ahead many more times, because it's great to have your insights and your knowledge there. Thank you for staying up so late to chat to outsiders, and have a great day tomorrow with Nigel Farage.